Hello, everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today, we've got some interesting phrases and idioms to delve into from the English radio show, Power English. Let's break them down so even the little language learners can understand. Come into play. In simple terms, it's when something starts having an effect or becomes important. For example, think of a game. The weather conditions can come into play during outdoor events, affecting how many people come and whether the event is successful. Or, in a soccer game, Sean's defense skills will come into play during the second half. On the other hand, it's used to talk about two different or opposite ideas. Imagine you want to buy an expensive designer bag. On the one hand, you really want it, but, on the other hand, you need to save money for an upcoming vacation. Or, there's a new restaurant with amazing food, but, on the other hand, the prices are quite high. Zoom in on something. Now, this one can be taken literally or figuratively. Literally, it's like when you use a camera to get a closer look. Think of TV cameras at an award show. They zoom in on the winner's face to show the excitement. Figuratively, it means to focus on a specific detail in a larger subject. Like when you're studying history, it's important to zoom in on specific time periods to understand the culture and social dynamics better. Whether or not to tilde, this one is all about making decisions. When you're not sure if you should do something, you use this phrase. For example, you might be still deciding whether or not to accept the job offer. Or, you're trying to figure out whether or not to invest in a new technology. So, there you have it, folks. We've covered these 4 phrases from Power English. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you in the next video.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's good to repeat so that people, know your name.
I'm like no 정신 these days. Korean people love it when I don't often use English and Korean together. I know that a lot of gyopos do that. But I like the no 정신.
No 정신.
Yeah, no 정신.
I'm like a white American. I'm not Korean American.
Right.
But
What do you
love the kind of like the gyopo style of like, oh my gosh, this is like so 맛있다. Like, this is so 대박, And so sometimes with my friends here in Korea, I talk like that.
It's true. But surprisingly, I don't talk like that.
Yeah.
And I don't really like it, but sometimes it can be fun. It can be actually very fun, but I don't make a habit.
Yeah.
I don't make it a habit of talking like that. But when I do my text, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, no 정신, and they get a kick out of that. Yeah. All right. So today we've got an article for you. And the title is, Are People Naturally Helpful with One Another? This is the question. So are people born to be helpful?
Yeah.
What do you think? What's your answer?
I think it's both. And I think it depends on the person.
Yeah.
I mean, because you look at little kids, some little kids are really helpful and want to help with everything. And some kids are super selfish.
That's true. That's true.
And I think we, as a society, we kind of learn that we need to help each other.
Yeah.
But naturally helpful? I don't know.
That's an interesting question, right? Okay. So we're going to talk about that in more detail. Here are the expressions that we're going to cover today. If something comes into play.
Yes.
This is interesting.
Yeah, so play here, we're not talking about a game. When you say something comes into play, you're saying that this factor becomes important.
Okay.
It's something that will affect the outcome.
Okay. And on the other hand,
it's when you're giving another viewpoint, either a different viewpoint or a viewpoint that conflicts, that disagrees with what you've just said.
Okay. And if you zoom in on something,
you're concentrating on a small detail.
Okay.
You're not looking at the big picture, you're looking at the small picture.
Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and listen to our article.
A study of people around the world found that humans help each other in small ways quite often. Sociologists have been researching this topic within specific cultures. However, this was the first study to look at humans as one group. When it comes to helpfulness, several things come into play. For example, in some cultures, the level of one's wealth or power may affect their decision of whether or not to help. On the other hand, when you zoom in on basic social interactions, cultural differences go away. For instance, if a child needs help, people in every culture around the world will assist the child.
Here we go. A study of people around the world found that humans help each other in small ways quite often. Oh, okay. So we are helpful.
Yes.
Sociologists have been researching this topic within specific cultures. However, this was the first study to look at humans as one group.
So not looking at just Korean society, just American society.
Just generally people.
All over the world.
Right,
okay.
humans. So basically they say that they do help each other quite often. And this expression quite often is how often? You think?
Pretty often?
Pretty often.
Like, yeah. It depends on what you're talking about. But in the span of 1 week, if you say quite often, I take 4 or 5 days out of the week.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's almost like, wow, it's a little bit of a surprise.
A little surprising.
It's quite often. Okay. Let's continue.
When it comes to helpfulness, several things come into play.
Okay. So we're talking about people or humans being helpful to one another. Several things come into play.
Yes.
So when you say several things come into play, what does this mean?
It means that you have to consider several things. There are several factors that will add together to make a result.
Okay.
So this coming to play means this matters. This will affect the decisions that people are making.
Okay. So, for example, in some cultures, the level of one's wealth or power may affect their decision of whether or not to help. Okay. So the first thing is how much money you have.
Yeah.
All
or
right?
power.
Or your power.
Yeah.
This can affect their decision of whether or not to help. Our power pattern today is whether or not to.
Yes.
And what does this mean?
So whether or not to. You know how in Korean you have the 할까 말까?
할까 말까.
Right.
Yes.
So whenever you say whether or not to, you're giving the positive and negative of the verb.
Okay.
So whether or not to help is to help or not to help.
That is the question.
That is the question.
Yes.
Which will I do?
Yes.
So that is why they have used whether or not to help here.
So wealth, money, power, that's a very important factor.
Yeah.
Well, I get, if I had a lot of money and power, I would definitely help.
Though, I think it's actually the opposite.
Opposite, yeah.
I think people with less money help more.
Help more.
I had a friend who worked in a charity, and she was responsible for going around and getting money for people in need. They didn't go to rich neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They went to poor neighborhoods.
Poor neighborhoods.
Because they would give money.
Well, it's because they understand.
Because they understand the situation.
Right. That's right. It makes sense. All right. On the other hand, when you zoom in on basic social interactions, cultural differences go away. Well, that's interesting. So, okay. So whether they're wealthy or not, this kind of comes into play.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yes.
which is what?
On the other hand means you are giving a different viewpoint. So in the first one, there were different cultures that affected wealth. So in some cultures, if you had money or not, it kind of changed the situation,
Right.
but other ones didn't. However, when we say on the other hand, you're giving a completely different situation.
When you zoom in on basic social interactions.
Yes.
So zoom in on basic social interactions.
Yeah. So to zoom in, I think a lot of us know Zoom from our phones or our cameras, how you go closer to the image to see a smaller part.
Right.
Here, whenever we were talking about zoom in on something, it's in and on. You have to have both of those. It means that you're focusing on a smaller, more detailed part of the problem. It's not an actual picture that you can see, but you're focusing on a smaller part of the situation.
Okay. So some things can make a difference.
Yeah.
On the other hand, some basic social interactions, some basic human things, it doesn't make a difference.
Right.
Okay.
It doesn't matter the culture.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter if you're Korean, American, British, whatever.
Right. Cultural differences go away, meaning there is no cultural difference. It's all the same wherever you go.
Yes.
Then they give you an example.
For instance, if a child needs help, people in every culture around the world will assist the child.
Yeah. It doesn't matter you're Korean, Russian, German. Child is a child.
Yeah.
And they will assist. A-S-S-I-S-T.
Right. So assist is another word for help.
Right.
However, it seems like you're doing the action together, whereas help can mean to kind of save someone, like they're in trouble.
That's a good point.
But for example, if a child is trying to carry something really heavy and an adult sees it, the adult might pick it up a little bit.
Yeah, assist him.
To assist the child. Yeah.
Okay, so in conclusion, what this is saying is that for basic social interactions, it's the same wherever in the world.
Yeah.
People who are hungry or children or the elderly or disabled. Very,
there are no cultural differences.
There are no cultural differences, but money, power, in every culture, it's a little bit different.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and listen to that one more time.
A study of people around the world found that humans help each other in small ways quite often. Sociologists have been researching this topic within specific cultures. However, this was the first study to look at humans as one group. When it comes to helpfulness, several things come into play. For example, in some cultures, the level of one's wealth or power may affect their decision of whether or not to help. On the other hand, when you zoom in on basic social interactions, cultural differences go away. For instance, if a child needs help, people in every culture around the world will assist the child.
All right, it's time for Power Note. Let's do a quick review. If something comes into play, it means that it becomes an important factor in something.
Yes.
That meeting went horribly wrong really fast.
Well, once name calling comes into play, it's hard to resolve calmly.
All right, so basically, the meeting, it was really bad, really fast. Okay? What happened? When once name calling comes into play. What is name calling?
So name calling is whenever you call someone a bad word.
Yeah.
And I think we all know what the bad words in English and Korean are. But yeah, once you start using them especially a business setting.
Oh, yeah.
That's a sign that you're very angry.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when that starts, here with the come into play, the people started to say bad things and call them you're a poopy head. And those bad words, things that you would say. Whenever people start saying that, whenever those things come into play, that's whenever the situation of the meeting just goes absolutely terrible.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Ugh.
I mean, you can be strong in your words, but name calling, oof. Ooh, that's serious. All right. Many factors come into play when designing a skyscraper.
Yes.
So there are many factors to consider.
Yes. For example, you have to think of the location. You have to think of the ground. Is it softer ground? Is it harder ground?
Yes.
Do you have other buildings nearby?
Right.
What are the government regulations? Some cities have a height limit that you can only build your skyscrapers.
Right.
All of those things come into play whenever you're designing a skyscraper.
Yeah, so a lot of things come into play. Whenever you do something, when you're working on a project, it's not one thing that you have to do, but you have to think about the people involved, the design, the money. All of those factors come into play, we usually say.
They're all things that are going to affect the outcome or affect your decision or action toward an outcome.
Okay. On the other hand means, okay, I just said something, but I'm going to say something completely different.
Yes.
And maybe it's like conflicting with what I just said.
Yeah, it's
meaning
going
the
against
opposite.
the opposite. Yeah.
If I get this job, I'll finally be earning what I deserve.
On the other hand, you'll be working 60 hours a week and have no life.
The more money you get, the more you have to work.
Isn't it true?
It is true. But sometimes we just look at the salary. Oh, that's a nice salary. But there's, reason why they're paying you that much. I could lend you the money, but on the other hand, I could let you work for it instead.
So you can either get that money and then have to return it, or just do work and receive the money itself.
Yeah. Right. This is a real nice kind of transitional phrase when you're writing academic papers or emails, and you're like, well, there is this point, but however, instead of using but or however, you could use on the other hand.
However, you can only say this once.
Ooh.
Because there can only be two viewpoints.
Yes.
Because people do not have three hands. We are not octopus. We're not squids. So
we don't have 8 hands.
We don't have 8 hands.
Oh,
so in a conversation, you cannot continue to say on the other hand, because you only have 2 hands. So you might hear it in like a joking way to say it. But yes, if you're going to use it in writing, you can only use this phrase once to give one opposite viewpoint.
Oh, that's a very good point. So remember, everyone, you only have 2 hands.
Yes. Some people have more, some people have less.
Okay,
but it's very rare.
Yes.
It's very rare.
Right, that's right. Okay. Good to know. Thank you, Cameron.
Yeah.
If you zoom in on something, so of course we have the app, but originally this comes from cameras, right? There's a zoom feature.
Yeah, you get closer. You look at it and it's bigger than it was.
Right. So to zoom in on, which is very important, to zoom in on something means to really focus or concentrate on something maybe related to a problem. Okay.
Yeah.
Why did they decide not to invest in the company?
They zoomed in on the debt and decided there was too much. Yeah, maybe other parts of the company were good, but that debt, that is a lot of debt, and we just can't do that.
Okay. Let's zoom in our declining sales and see what we can do about it.
Yeah, zoom in on our declining sales.
Okay.
So this would be used in like a meeting. Maybe there are many topics about this meeting, but let's zoom in on the sales for a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the sales.
Yeah, that's right. And as you can see from both examples, debt, and then declining sales.
Yeah.
Your sales are not doing so well. Problems, right?
Yeah.
So let's focus on it and see how we can resolve the problem.
Yes.
Okay.
It is often about negative things.
Yeah, it's true. You don't zoom in on your wealth or...
it's not often the good things.
Yeah.
Not often. I would say mostly you zoom in on the bad things.
Okay. Whether or not to is our power pattern.
Yeah.
So, what does this mean?
Will I do it? Will I not do it?
Okay. I don't know whether or not to go to the party tonight.
갈까 말까?
갈까? 파티 갈까? 말까?
Have you decided whether or not you're going to come with us?
같이 올 거야? 말 거야? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Assist is our power vocab on page 150. Do check out the definition. And let's go ahead and thank our sponsor.
한국토익위원회에서 취업가수